We've got a real simple assignment today. We've got about 25 minutes to talk about how the vehicle is going to change from connectivity and autonomy and all these different changes we're seeing. And so that should be easy to solve in 25 minutes. So anyway, we're gonna chat, and we've got a great panel lined up to do it with very diverse backgrounds. Tim Filippo, Product Strategy and Cross-Car Line Manager for Jaguar Land Rover. Grant Bodley, General Manager, Global Manufacturing, Hortonworks. Gareth Williams, Director of Advanced Development, Audio and Video Communications, Mitsubishi Electric. Brett Scott, Head of Silicon Valley Future Technologies, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, and Andrew Poliak, VP Product Planning at Panasonic. And Andrew's a late addition, but he's got a long history with telematics and a long history in the industry. So, guys, let's start it out. I mean, typically when we think about connected cars and what they're going to look like in the future, we have this kind of cartoon that we see of, you know, a living room on wheels, or some other thing that is rather fantastical. So why don't we start off by just saying, how do we really see? I mean, we've seen these minor changes with sort of the CD player disappearing and things, and more head-up displays. But why don't we just have a talk for just a couple of minutes about what you really think are going to be the new ideas that are going to come up, or what are we going to see that are changes in the interior that people are going to notice?
I'll start by being the buzzkill. So until we have full autonomy, the driver's going to need to re-engage and be able to re-engage at a moment's notice when the car says, I can't handle this situation, right? So in the short term, we're going to still see a very familiar looking cockpit, and anything that we do present to the driver, whether it's multiple screens or things like that, will need to be able to be cleared away so the driver can actually get back to the task of driving. Once we get full autonomy, that's when our designers are really going to get to cut loose, and that's where you're going to get the living room on wheels, right, where you actually can be completely disengaged. You don't have to kind of keep some mental capacity on the act of what the vehicle's doing. In that case, I see a heads-up display, because customers will want to know what the vehicle's doing, but it might be as simple as a thumbs up and a thumbs down, as in, I like what you just did there, autonomous car, or I didn't like what you just did there, to have some kind of feedback loop. But that's when it's really going to start to get fun.
And that transition period is really about, as the users start to use those autonomous features, making sure that they're comfortable with them, and giving them enough information in that time so that when the car does take over, that they understand what it's going to do.
And the task of managing cognitive load is going to become very important with or without autonomy. There's so much information being presented to the users in a vehicle that we have to think about where we put that information and how it's displayed, so that the information that's most important is available to the user and is obvious to the user. And that will probably hit us well ahead of full-scale autonomous solution, very broad autonomous solution. The other things that we have to track is the fact that habits around car ownership are changing, and that the thing that we call a car is becoming as much a space as it is a car. And that's going to bring forth a lot of interesting industrial design work that will yield some interesting connectivity solutions, as it has in other spaces. So I don't know that any person has an exact answer for that question for the next 5 years, but we do know that we have to look on cognitive load to make sure that we understand that people are being attentive, are focusing on the right information, and are able to take in all of this information that's coming at them from their various sources and make it convenient and safe.
But head-up displays have been kind of, well, they've been around for like 20 years now. It's incredible. We see these. Is there going to be a bigger future now with colors and more information up there, or does it just turn into, you know, some people are worried about this space then getting invaded by commercials and all, you know, all sorts of things. So what's the future of the head-up display? I mean, does it become a major issue in the car, or is it kind of just another one of the instrument clusters that people will get used to?
I think that a lot of the technology is going to disappear in the car. You're not going to notice it. It's going to be there, but it's going to be invisible. And you'll start to see information be contextually relevant and portrayed to the driver or the passengers that are necessary for them to engage. Because right now, there's so much information being gathered by the vehicle, there's so much content that you could have access to at any given time, from multiple displays within the vehicle to head-up displays to sound and audible warnings. I think a lot of it will start to blend and become a little bit more natural, and it will be relevant to what's going on right now. We've demonstrated things like audio landscapes that really allow you to know that something's on your right. Maybe it's a school zone, maybe it's a motorcycle. There's a company launching an app in the next month that's called Rider. And what they do is they give it free for tier 1s and OEMs to integrate this solution. And then you pay to have it on your mobile phone on a motorcycle, and it alerts cars that you're going by them so they don't take you out in a lane. There'll just be these things that can take those kind of data inputs and make them contextually relevant to what you're doing right then in the car.
And I think the tendency there is when you say, you get this big heads-up display is to really to just mirror all the information up there. But as Andrew is saying, that's not what makes sense for the user. And as Brett mentioned, that's the cognitive overload when you do that. So it really is paying attention to what's needed at that time and getting that relevant information in front of the driver.
So this big exploded, another one of the things we see so often as an example is the Tesla, this huge touchpad in front is the future, but it looks real crowded, like the dashboard of your phone, and from what I hear, that's too much information for when you're in a car, right? You don't want that much information, or you maybe don't want a big touchscreen that you have to look down at. Well, how about from
yeah, so as we see the convenience and demand for ride sharing and ultimately moving to more autonomous driving, I see the whole interplay with connected services becoming very, very dominant, where it's very convenient, where the car actually becomes part of the network of different modes of transportation, where each individual has a way of bringing their digital experience with them. They'll have their commercial transactions happening in the car that are relevant to them. Maybe they get offered mobility for free in exchange for sharing some of their data, incentives for things like that, which would make their lives easier, and ultimately, connect their entire digital life through maybe a connected services network, which I think will have a profound effect on the design of the vehicle.
How about the instrument clusters and what, like the new Audi A4, and Audi has a number of these very interesting instrument clusters now that have a brilliant display, and then they'll show you that the whole instrument cluster will turn into a map with just two little gauges, or it's very good at displaying vastly different types of information and playing one up against the other. Is that part of the future of instrument clusters, or are people going to consider that too complex or just too something they don't like?
For Jaguar, we're already doing that on the XJ as well, where you can mirror the map on your instrument cluster. We've had the digital cluster in that car since probably 2011 or so. It's a matter of context, what we were talking about before, to put the relevant information that the driver needs. So the mission critical stuff goes in the heads-up display, the stuff that you need to use occasionally goes in the instrument cluster, and then the stuff that maybe the passenger would interact with, or the things you only need to use occasionally, go in the center stack. We've also been using touchscreens for a long time, and we started out by putting everything in the touchscreen and realized it really wasn't the right place for it. So we've been slowly pulling some things back out. So heating and ventilation controls, you probably just want to reach out and just turn that dial. That seems regressive to some people. That's the easiest way to interact with that control. So finding the right balance of what goes where, I think, is what we're all trying to figure out.
Yeah, I think JLR was interesting because they were the first ones with that 12.3-inch TFT in 2010. But if you looked at it, you put it in four-wheel drive, and it brings up a picture of the vehicle, and it can show it pitch and yaw, and it has a little 3D implementation and example, and I think they've done a great job again of making it contextually relevant. When you put it in race mode in the Jag, it brings up a bigger tack, it brings up a different display that again is relevant to what you're doing.
So that brings up an interesting point, because I remember we tested that car in the Jag, and at first the idea was, Jesus, it's kind of cartoonish. This doesn't fit a $100,000 car or whatever. I mean, there was I think some controversy. Now it looks like, has that subsided? I mean, with better graphics and again, the fact that the smartphone is determining really our values more than say historical vehicles or something. I mean, is that a big change that's coming on now? That we're looking at all digital displays differently? And
it's a real challenge moving forward, because there's still a large portion of the buying public that cannot afford a 12-inch screen, but have a thirst and a current use of lots of information. So all of the car companies are exploring ways to bring this relevant information into the vehicle in a way that can be afforded by the broader population. And so on a luxury car, certainly we'll always have large screens throughout the car, but we have to figure out other ways to bring that context-relevant information to people that can't afford the $40,000 car, because the information will be in the car even if the displays are not. So displays, voice technologies, context-sensitive displays, so that the display might be smaller but have the right information at the right time. All of these things are going to become really important as we look to the next 5 years, so that we have solutions for luxury brands, not luxury brands, the average buyer, luxury buyers, et cetera.
Yeah, by the way, you mentioned something earlier about the, as you move to autonomous, what will it change in terms of giving comfort to let go of the steering wheel? And it's interesting, you look at some of the vehicle manufacturers out there have actually built in a certain amount of comfort ADAS. The ability to say, my car sees what I'm seeing and it's showing it on the screen. If you look at the Tesla screen, they actually can show that there's a car next to you. And they're doing redundant systems, one to do control, one to do some of the, still process that images and that data they're getting from the sensors, but do it to provide a redundancy, but also do it to provide that kind of comfort ADAS, to let people go, okay, my car sees what I see, I can reliably, or I can let go of the wheel and feel confident that it's going to do the right things. So there'll be a lot of those baby steps, getting people comfortable with the technology and allow them to start using it.
Mm-hmm. And we'll also see some really interesting non-consumer applications. For example, imagine a UPS truck where the passenger is always in the back because his only job is to move the box, not to drive. You suddenly don't need a windshield or a steering wheel or wipers or air conditioning in the front. Yep. And the connectivity moves to a different part of the car, to the vehicle. The whole thing changes around autonomy and what it might present to non-commercial applications. So I suspect that over the next 10 years or so, we're going to see some really cool and unusual and thought-changing ideas around the industrial design of a vehicle based on the presence of autonomy, connectivity, and what the user is expecting from the...
Yeah. And I'd like to just add to a point that Brett made a little earlier around context relevance. So having the context of the driver and the car, having that data available so that you can really tailor the experience to that person will, I think, dramatically simplify the whole HMI interaction. So it's not one size fits all, but it's really tailored for that particular situation or that driver, you know. So I think there it'll become a lot less busy and more, relevant for that driver.
But one of the challenges there, like you were saying, is to have that experience at the sort of entry-level vehicle, but then the people that have the much more expensive vehicles, when they move to the entry vehicle for their rental, or maybe it's their kids' vehicles or something, that they're not lost without all the extra, but that's a seamless transition from one to the other.
Because I remember, well, I covered the growth of robots back in the 80s and the 90s, and back then it started out where they had these incredible devices that could, act like humans, and they could touch and feel, and they were going to take over all factories. But then they found out that they were expensive to maintain, and robots became sort of a very dedicated type of device where they're used in the auto industry to paint cars and all the jobs that were not good. And then still the more jobs that required more dexterity and thought still went to humans. So do we see autonomous cars here? When it just piqued my interest now, does it do autonomous cars become kind of spread out throughout the whole product portfolio? Or are they on the upper end, or are they on the lower end? Because I know there's some, quite a bit of evidence that's coming out now that baby boomers don't like the idea of autonomy. They don't want to drive them. The ones that are most accepting of autonomous cars are young people, and they're the ones who are least able to afford them. So how does that change the dynamic?
I think ride sharing and e-hailing will drive the demand for low-cost autonomous vehicles that can roam in platoon and you know, provide mobility at a dramatically lower cost. So I think you know, it's not just going to be the upper end of the market in luxury, but it's also going to be convenience for the average person to, you know, get from A to B, and also be connected with their life as they go through that journey.
Yeah, I think there's actually all ends of the spectrum. So in Georgia, they're doing a project with autonomous golf carts around the city to take you through wherever you park down to the stadium and other types of applications. On the high end, even on fleets with trucking, I visited a trucking company a few years ago that said if they can reduce the weight of a truck by 100 pounds, it saves almost $1 million in operating expense over the course of the year. So you can start taking out, like you said, the heaters, a lot of things that can reduce weight. There'll be reasons to do it, and definitely on the fleet side, on the rideshare and mobility space, that's going to drive a lot of technology and a lot of pieces to make those cars autonomous quicker, just to get more drivers on the road, even if they're automated drivers, and more cars that can provide it for a longer daily period.
And the estimates that I've seen from several sources are that there'll be, between now and 2050, an extra 1 trillion road miles of driving done from people under 24 and over 55. So people that are becoming less able, let's say you want your parents to go to the grocery store, and they've, as baby boomers, have had independence for their entire lives, can maintain their independence with autonomy.
Yeah.
They can go grocery shopping without having to drive, but have their own car, for example. So that extra 1 trillion miles tells me that the automotive industry has a very strong life ahead of it. The habits associated with driving are about to change in some fashion. We don't all know how they'll change. And autonomy is a piece of that. Even in the little ways, we might see the design of a cup holder change, because now I can drink coffee the way I do at my desk for 48 minutes while the car's taking itself around. And that industrial design work associated with a cup holder might change as a result of autonomy. So it's a really interesting time.
As a luxury brand, right, there are commodity cars now, and there will be commodity autonomous cars in the future, right? But we're going to set ourselves apart. Technology in of itself is not luxury. I know a lot of people think if you just throw technology in, it's luxury. Technology is inert. It's how you use it. What our customers are buying is an experience, and they're buying craftsmanship, and they want to know that there was someone behind it, not just the robots that you were talking about, right? So our customer is going to want autonomy, but I don't think they're going to really want to participate in the shared ownership model, right? There already are shared ownership models for lots of things, right? You don't need to own a washing machine. You can go to a laundromat. That's not where my customers are going to choose to do their laundry, right? They're going to choose to own their own Jaguar or Range Rover autonomous vehicle in the future when we have level 5, right? Because there's going to be something about it. If you're still going to spend an hour riding in that to work, you're still going to want to impress your neighbors. You're still going to want to have the craftsmanship, the wood, the leather, the sound system, even if you're not the one physically holding the wheel.
I agree with that, but in addition, rather than just having access to, you know, one vehicle configured a certain way, you know, if you want to go surfing on the weekend and you want to add your family, and you may need a bigger car, or maybe you need a smaller car and maybe a car that could go on the carpool lane. So having access to a variety of vehicles in addition to the one you own, I think is probably going to be something that will come into play.
Yeah, that becomes a business challenge for us, though, because then you have the peak usage problem, right?
Yeah.
If everybody wants a convertible to go to the beach on the weekend, and that's where, honestly, being wealthy is nice, because you can own your own resource and not have to worry about, all right, well, there's a long line of reservations for wintertime when it's snowing to get up to the mountains. So there's so many business challenges, which is one of the things that just makes it so exciting.
It's a really exciting time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Jack, have we short on time? Are we now? Are we? We've got. Should we take some questions from the audience now, or keep chatting?
So I think we've got one question coming from Slido. but that doesn't mean that we have to stop there. Can you just flip to... So I'll let you read that.
Oh, okay. From a service perspective, there are countless examples of part failures that were engineering oversights. How can these be overcome to allow steering wheel removal?
Could take that leap.
No takers on that one?
We trust you to do your jobs.
Yeah.
You test some more, and you test again, right? That's the difference between making an automobile and making an app for a smartphone, is you have to be conscientious of the fact that there are people inside your product, and so you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, exactly. And if you look at the safety requirements for an autonomous car versus an aircraft, they're probably much higher. Because you're having to deal with situations, decision making, immediately. So it's going to have to go its full course and make sure that it is safe to do. But I'm sure it's going to get there.
One of the things that really I find hysterical are the people that are saying autonomous cars are not going to have airbags or seat belts or crumple zones because we're going to live in this perfect future where nothing's ever going to fail. I'm sorry, that's a fantasy, right? Autonomous cars and driver cars are going to share the road for decades to come. I don't think I want to drive around in a car without safety systems, right? So, yeah.
I think also if you want to see a way to slow down the launch of autonomous cars, that will also impact this question about the steering wheel removal. It'll be around also security, and not just safety, but security. The minute we have autonomous car have any kind of security concern, that will set back, I think, a lot of the autonomous future for quite a while.
And I would say long before moving the steering wheel out of the car, we are all still working very heavily on making the information that is already in the car safe and enjoyable to provide the experiences that people want. So that the steering wheel out of the car is a final step of many steps to provide a safe and enjoyable experience.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any other questions before we finish the panel? Has anyone got anything else to put to our panel of experts? Okay, then
while we're waiting for hands to go up, and one other thing with this, I worry that we're so eager to take the steering wheel out of the car. We've hyped this up so much, right? And the media is hyping it up that people are going to be very disappointed when this doesn't happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. At Jaguar and Land Rover, when we show a concept car, it's usually very close to what we're actually going to produce, right? Because you want to get people excited about the reality of what they can purchase, right? If you show them this and then what they can actually buy is this, they're disappointed. But when you show them this and you actually deliver this in the showroom 2 years later, they're throwing money at you, right? I think we need to temper some of the enthusiasm in the media maybe a little bit, that people think that we're going to take the steering wheels out of the car in 2-3 years. That's not going to happen. So I think we need to worry about making some disillusionment.
We see that as sort of comparing the IoT design aesthetic to automotive, where IoT, you see things that are very simple. They may not even have a screen or a user interface, and everything's configured through some other, whether it's your phone or your computer or something. And yeah, we definitely see that that idea being projected into the automotive space. But I think what we're all saying here is we just don't see that transition in the near future, because certainly simplifying things, making things more easy to use in the vehicle is where we're moving towards, but not that complete void of all interfaces.
Okay, I think Jack's going to get the hook out on us.
Don't we have 5 minutes?
Oh, we got 5 minutes.
We have a few more questions, so we've had
okay.
one
I'll
come
tell you,
up.
I want to answer the one for the head of Silicon Valley. No.
Go for it.
I would like to, I'll let you do that one. I do want to, because I was going to mention something about the third question. I know it didn't get elevated up to the top, but to me, Zipcar said it yesterday morning a little bit, that the amount of fleet deals that they have right now with different OEMs. And if you look at an Uber and the amount of vehicles they have on the road on any given second, they become one of the largest fleet potential purchasers in the planet. And that will be moving up to be significantly more, and the only thing stopping them are drivers and cars, right? So is that going to cause design changes? Absolutely. So we're looking at what are the technologies that we can bring to an Uber. There's things around identifying people when they get in the car to make sure they got into the right car, to make sure that, so we have cameras, vision systems. There's things around autonomy you have to design. They might be the ones that write the spec for the OEMs, which will be kind of interesting to see instead of it going to
just like
OEM
New York
to a
City,
tier one.
Yeah, the New York City Taxi and Limousine Commission specifies the design of a taxi cab. I could see a day when Uber has the buying power to influence vehicle design.
Yeah, so absolutely there'll be changes to the design of the car from that.
Absolutely, and even more important than Uber itself are all of the habits that are being formed around the notion of ride sharing and how people consider purchasing of vehicles and how they get around from point A to point B is just changing. And changing with a multitude of companies like Uber in different ways in different parts of the world. So being able to track these new habits and how they are affecting usage of vehicles is becoming important to every car company and differently in different regions.
So it looks like we got a question for Brett specifically too about what are the responsibilities of the head of Silicon Valley Future Technologies? I mean, are you making flying cars over there, or what are you doing?
The big part of what I do is help companies reach out to Fiat Chrysler automobiles because anyone that has worked with the automotive industry knows how difficult it is to find the right contact. We're all big companies, and sometimes it's just getting the right person in the right room. I joke with people and I say, I want to avoid startups from eating 12 steak dinners to meet with the right person. And that's part of what I do is to help companies that I see in Silicon Valley reach out to the right people in Fiat Chrysler so that we have opportunities to make business.
Sounds good.
And technology.
Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there. So thank you very much for answering those Slido questions, and thank you for that really stimulating debate.